So it's the 30th of November 2019, and today's upload is in relation to the human rights violations and the issue of being a victim of crime. Um, as I've shared already, the occurrences have been exacerbating since 2017. Now, as a recoverer and survivor of sexual assault and revenge porn from over a decade ago, that was never um, acknowledged or rectified. These recent events have been exacerbating, as I've mentioned. So basically, the issue that I'm going to share about is the issue of legal violations. Um, Now, as I've mentioned, these human rights issues have involved 29 human rights violations simply due to hate crime. The issue of medical counsel and medical negligence is one issue. The issue of mental health commission and unlawful detainments and misdiagnoses and prescription of harmful medication is another issue. Um, Violation of my privacy and defamation of my character and capabilities and reputation is another issue. Financial theft that I have experienced and financial exploitation and financial abuse is another issue. The spiritual violations and spiritual abuse that I experienced is another issue. So basically, of the Declaration of Human Rights, 29 of my human rights have been violated. Now, as I've mentioned in previous uploads, I've contacted victim support groups, I've contacted politicians, I've contacted the relevant authorities, contacted Charlie Flanagan in the Department of Justice and Equality. Um, I've contacted the United Nations. I've contacted the civil liberty groups, and I've clearly specified each of the violations that I've experienced. And coincidentally, um, throughout this vendetta of hate crime, my acknowledgements that I've received, but the acknowledgements that I've received are automated responses. In other words, we're not acknowledging your correspondence, and also that it's not within our remit. That's another reply that I've received. I've also received a lot of false information, and in other areas of this human rights violation issue, there are um, lots of information that have been withheld from me. Um, the marital desertion that I'm experiencing has resulted in a living arrangement of local government housing. I'm unsupported, um, etc., etc. And this onslaught of assault of my human rights has only commenced since I got married. Um, and just when I had recovered from the sexual assault that occurred in this town over a decade ago, for this to happen now again, and not even to have any support services provided by the government or the authorities is a very serious issue. The most serious issue is that with all these violations occurring, um, and with the financial abuse and theft that has occurred as well, um, the issue of my legal rights and entitlements has been completely overlooked. Um, Throughout this entire situation, not once have I been consulted with regard to the validity or authenticity of what has been said or claimed. Not once have I been consulted about the matters that anonymous individuals have falsely claimed. So there's been, as I've said, privacy violations, intrusions and interference. There's been spiritual violations and spiritual abuse and spiritual violence. So the big issue is with all of these matters and this vendetta of hate crime and vindication and victimization and violations, um, my legal rights have been withheld from me also. Now, the biggest concern for me is that my medical rights have been withheld from me to, as I've said, be attending a doctor and not to have the ailments that you're suffering from untreated, while anonymous individuals are running off and discussing matters that are completely fabricated, um, without even consulting me or, involving me. Are, you know, health is wealth, isn't that what they say? But as I've mentioned, my career has been destroyed also by the people in this town that are controlling a situation, a very sordid situation that was caused initially due to interferences and intrusions and false claims that has caused such a serious matter that the only solution that they think capable of rectifying it is with another serious um, assault of my human rights with further false claims and allegations. So, without the legal aid or legal supports or legal advice that I'm entitled to, um, this is how dangerous this situation is. Legally, with regard to the medical council not acknowledging the medical negligence I've experienced, and with regard to the Mental Health Commission not acknowledging the intrusions and unlawful detainments, etc., that I've experienced, all since being married, coincidentally. Um, and with regard to the issue of marital desertion and the issue of family property, these are all matters that have been affecting my life because of other people's vendettas that are a very serious disservice to society and the pillars of society that uphold the integrity and, you know, dignity of the constitution of this country. But obviously, the intention of the aggressors and abusers um, is to ensure that there is a very blatant obstruction of justice. So, for Charlie Flanagan's interest this morning, as a qualified professional teacher, as a deserted wife that's been very seriously betrayed and defamed, and as a mother and as a, you know, victim of spiritual abuse and violence and etc., 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 I think Charlie Flanagan has a very serious obligation to acknowledge this issue for the serious issue that it is. Because as a woman that hasn't been involved in any criminality or that hasn't caused any offences, and that has been law abiding and that has respected society and that has been intruded upon and lied about, um, Charlie Flanagan and his department seriously need to acknowledge how this situation has exacerbated and endangered innocent lives. Um, Not just my innocent life, but other innocents. And that's not good enough in this democracy, if that's what we're living in. As I've said, there's been um, information about politics and public services and legislation that I've sought that has also been withheld from me. So basically, the government um, that has been aware of the individuals uh, that have been co- uh, perpetrating these wrongdoings and that have been trying to sweep them under the carpet and pretend that they didn't happen is a very lame, you know, it's a sad reflection on society and it's a sad sign of the times. And I might look as if I have too much time on my hands now at the moment with all the uploads, but being unemployed due to defamation and physical ailments, etc., etc., I'm wondering, is the government going to acknowledge the seriousness of the legal violations, the defamation and false allegations, the violations of privacy, the medical violations and negligence that I've experienced, and the intrusion of mental health professionals that have no business concerning themselves with me at all? Um, for a society just to say what it wants and do what it wants is pretty serious, and I don't appreciate being a victim of other people's issues. Um, for me to be in this kind of a situation, as I've already stated, isn't good enough for any human being. So, for those that are orchestrating these violations and wrongdoings. Um, I'm wondering, is the government going to be prepared at any stage to confront all the damage and harm, loss and thieving and grief and suffering that has been so unnecessarily, so senselessly, so shamelessly, and so recklessly caused for an innocent woman, mother, deserted wife, teacher, law abiding citizen in Tralee, County Kerry?